Welcome. Thanks for joining this webinar on 2021 IoT trends. We've got people still coming in, so we're going to wait about 60 seconds for those to come in, and then we'll get started. But thanks for joining. If you're just joining, thanks for joining us. We're going to start in about 30 seconds as we still see people trickling in. Thanks for your patience. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We are happy to present this webinar on 2021 IoT trends, asset tracking for indoor, outdoor, and everywhere in between. We have with us Bob Proctor and Eric Simoni. Bob is the co-founder and CEO of Link Labs, a leading provider of an end-to-end IoT platform for tagging, locating, and monitoring equipment, supplies, assets, anywhere at any time. With a PhD in applied physics and 25 years of entrepreneurial and business leadership, Bob is also a founding principal of Blue Venture Investors, a venture capital investment company that supports early stage entrepreneurs in the Mid-Atlantic region of the US, which gives him a unique point of view on a wide range of emerging technologies and their novel applications and potential market viability. Also with us is Eric Simoni. Eric Simoni is the founder and CEO of Clearblade Inc., an IoT and edge computing no-code software company active across several verticals, including transportation, building, facilities, and logistics. Prior to starting Clearblade, Eric was the founder and CEO/CTO of Complete Incorporated, which sold to Proficient Inc. in May of 2000, establishing them as a major player in enterprise consulting. Earlier in his career, Eric achieved success in various engineering, product development, and sales roles at IBM and Johns Hopkins Hospital. Eric has a degree in computer science from Purdue University and is a recognized distinguished alumni. He currently resides in Austin, Texas with his wife Toni and his two sons Xander and Dexter. Welcome, Bob. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
One quick administrative note, if there are questions as we go through on these trends that we'll discuss today, please submit them via chat. We have hundreds of attendees today, and we'll see questions coming in through chat, and Jennifer will bring them in to the group as appropriate. So with that, why don't we dive in? First trend that we'd like to discuss is the disruptive speed of digital transformation. If you think about what's happened with COVID, it's been a massive step change in the adoption of technology. Remote work, telehealth, e-commerce, logistics distribution, remote learning. Those are all the things that come to mind immediately in terms of the speed at which there's been a transformation and a step change in that speed. The question is, does that just stop there, or does it really go into other industries? What we're seeing at Link Labs, and I think Eric would agree as well at Clearblade, is that this step change of speed of digital transformation is now, if you will, going like dominoes into other industries. So we're seeing a rapid acceleration in digital transformation, which has a lot of urgency implications for companies today thinking about how fast they should step on the gas from a digitization perspective. Eric, thoughts from you?
Yeah, Bob, I completely agree with what you're saying. We've seen a massive increase, obviously, with our partnership with Link Labs, but across many different industry verticals. We do a lot of work in transportation, in fact, specifically rail. And when COVID hit earlier this year, obviously, lots of slowdown, lots of delays, et cetera. But as we got further into the year, the importance of remotely tracking and monitoring assets across railways, across maintenance facilities, across logistics increased tremendously from our perspective. And we have many customers that now see the importance of remotely monitoring all of their assets and digitizing the way that they run their business. So we've seen an uptick across the board.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We're seeing things like vaccine distribution driving enormous need for tracking and monitoring, not just in the cold chain, but you're seeing, again, that incredible investment in volumes driving down the cost curve and allowing more and more things to be tracked. Probably tease up our next trend that we're seeing. The way I think about this is affordability. In 2019, at Link Labs, we were doing a fair amount of tracking, monitoring of assets, either moving through supply and distribution chains or indoor monitoring of assets, everything from tools, calibrated instruments, people, work in process, and a lot of science projects in 2019, but the technology really hadn't started to come down the cost curve. Whereas if you look across 2020 and the year of COVID, I think most companies, including ourselves, really pushed hard on product innovation. It's the one thing that you can invest in heavily when the world's hunkered down and not buying as much to drive down cost. And today what we're seeing is much more affordable solutions where generate much more ROI across many applications and verticals.
Yep.
Again, I'll turn it over to you to Eric to.
Yeah, Bob, I'd love to riff on this one for a little bit because we're seeing affordability really increase with IoT solutions. And I'll tell you, you hit on something, the IoT science experiment, right? It's something that we've been talking about over here for a few years is we see way too many IoT science experiments out in the market where, look, IoT is hard. I'm not really, making light of this, the fact that it takes lots of different folks to come together, different expertise. But the only way that we're going to get IoT adoption is a combination of affordability and putting the pieces together for our customers so they can deploy solutions and not spend months or years paying by the hour to build a bespoke solution for their business, right? Now, that's easier said than done because depending on your industry, you've got to pair up the right hardware technology with the right software technology, the right communications infrastructure, the right security. We can go on and on about all the different parts that are involved in IoT. But to get to that affordability, it's going to take partnerships like we have with Link Labs to combine the best of both worlds, the best breed sensor technology, radio technology, software technology, communications technology. And that takes, there's a technology part of it, but there's also just the business side of it. It takes a bunch of companies coming together and agreeing to work together in a certain way. And giving business people and operational people turnkey solutions that solve a problem is something that we've seen is critical for a while now, and have really worked towards partnerships like this where we can deliver turnkey out of the box. You plug it in, you configure it, and you're now tracking rail cars, or you're now tracking pallets of material. You're now monitoring equipment that already exists in the field in a way that doesn't silo you into one solution. And again, that's a lot of words. We can expand more on that. But what we're seeing is affordability, because sensor technology, gateway technology, communications technology, and software are getting better, faster, more efficient to get to price per unit equations that fit various different business models.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I'm going to show a slide here about how we like to think about the IoT addressable market. The easiest way to think about it is from a demand curve perspective from microeconomics. Vaccine shipments, funny, I've used this example since pre-COVID, are typically tracked anyway. You have something that's worth $100,000 or more dollars, you could take a cell phone and hook it to a big battery and strap it onto the pallet and still generate a positive ROI because of the value of the asset that you're shipping. You get down to a $10,000 server, we tend to see a couple of years ago those sometimes would be tracked, sometimes would not be tracked. $5,000 generator, $500 to $1,000 shipping rack, get down to $100 or less beer keg. You know, all these things exist in the world today. Why have they not been tracked before now? The answer is simply cost. The assets that need to be tracked and monitored exist. It's a question of cost and driving cost out of the solution. And what's interesting is right now we are running pilots that I would expect to start to scale later this year in this far right-hand side of this curve, shipping racks, beer kegs, items that at a $50 to $500 value heretofore were simply uneconomic to track and monitor. Now that becomes economic. And the business value is very clear. You know, if you go to the far right with beer kegs, there's everything from out of stock situations at bars and restaurants, there's logistics, distribution optimization, there's brand control from temperature going out of bounds and serving bad products, there's production forecasting, there's recovering lost steel and just not replacing these things as often. So there's lots of value to be created as long as you can get the cost of locating and monitoring these assets, way down the cost curve. So what we're seeing today is,
sorry,
that this is now real, right? This is all coming together really nicely. So.
Yeah, when you showed the slide to me the other day, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have talked with companies that do every one of these things, right? And if I go back a few years, beer keg wasn't possible, right? The just price point was too expensive, and the functionality that we're providing, it may not be needed all the way down, but when you can get to a point where you can start tracking a beer keg, for example, and that same system can then track, maybe in the same business, your shipping rack or your generators that keep the beer cool, right? Or your servers that are driving your infrastructure. That's one of the keys to getting this affordability curve right, is being able to start at any point in the spectrum and deliver a solution that's cost effective, but also let that customer know just because we're tracking widget, ABC, doesn't mean we can't now expand that to monitoring device, your generators. It's the same system that gives you the same functionality, but you can start adding components along the way to build your digital transformation strategy. And that may also apply to non-physical devices. These could be data feeds from your supply chain system or data feeds from your financial systems, and streaming all this data, not only to where it needs to be, but using that data for things like machine learning and AI. I love all the discussion around ML and AI. It's exciting, but I think what gets overlooked is the fact that getting access to live real-time data is a real bear. It takes a lot of work to attach all this stuff and get this data flowing. And companies today don't need 47 different solutions sold by different vendors that track just beer kegs or just generators or just vaccine shipments. They need a solution that's expandable to be inclusionary for all of the things in their business, allowing them from a business perspective to decide what the value is to get that data, what to do with that data, and how to optimize their business or even change their business models in some way.
Yeah, no, a great summary. The two things that come to mind. So go ahead, Jennifer.
Yep, we've got several questions coming in related to this topic. So one of the things that is driving down lower cost is battery-free Bluetooth tags. And Magnus has asked, will Link Labs or its partners work with some of these battery-free Bluetooth tags?
Yeah, the answer to that is absolutely. If you think about this cost curve, it really is fundamental to the Link Labs and Clearblade strategy. The notion is to continue to adopt innovations in the marketplace that drive out cost. Battery-free Bluetooth means the tags are going to be far less expensive, so we integrate with battery-free Bluetooth. Similar advances in network layer technologies also matter. Advances in configurability from the cloud also matter. Sensors that are probing different temperatures. So you have to have this ability to adopt all the innovations very rapidly, and this is why we think it's a good, frankly, the business that we're in at Link Labs is a good business to be in because there's so much breadth and innovation up and down the technology stack. It really takes a company that's purely focused on that to be successful.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've learned a lot about powered and non-powered devices, a lot about radio, a lot about battery life, and that's because Clearblade, we're not hardware experts, right? We are software people, and when Link Labs and Clearblade found each other, we realized, look, there's some overlap in what we do, but primarily we have different skill sets that complement each other, and having the best of breed technology advancements in sensor technology, gateway technology, firmware technology that Link Labs focuses on and the solutions that they focus on. And we tend to come at it from more the enterprise end. And we realize, look, we really marry each other at the gateway or at the sensor, and we each have expertise. Knowing that Link Labs is out there innovating every day, focused on their expertise, and we're out there focused on ours. We'll get into some of this later. That's what we were just talking about. You combine the best of both companies and then offer solutions to your customer that drive out complexity and cost.
Absolutely.
Do you have examples of some of these success cases that show ROI and a reduction of expenses?
Yeah, I'll let you take that, or I've got one.
Sure, go ahead, Eric.
So, we have one customer, it's a large aerospace manufacturer that, I never thought that you need to track work stands or nitrogen bottle carts. I mean, these are things that, work around an airfield, right? That are part of aircraft maintenance. And been working with this customer for just over a year. They've been able to tag thousands of assets, right, across multiple airports that go into the operational dance of grounded aircraft maintenance, as you can imagine, has been a bit more critical over the last year. But the savings that they experience, and this is just based on some initial data, was 1,000% return on investment for tracking equipment related to aircraft maintenance. And really just from where's the asset at the time I need it? Is it lost? Do I need to go buy a new one? Maybe I change my operational procedures to be more efficient with the use of one asset. Maybe I don't have enough of one asset and I need more. And now I have the historical data to send to upper management to say, go buy more of those things. That has been fascinating for me to watch and hear how what I thought was kind of a basic use case of tracking equipment just point in time, to see how it really impacted a business I didn't know much about.
Yeah, great example. I'll give a couple of categories that all are backed up by case examples. I don't think we have time right now to go through all of them. The one example is returnable packaging assets, carts, crates, totes, shipping racks that are flowing loops, even beer kegs. The cycle time of those assets, if you can increase that from 3 or 4 uses per year, or 5 or 6, depending on the business, to 50% more, you may have, we've seen companies everywhere, with tens of millions to over, hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in the physical racks and totes that ship goods in loops, and those things are sitting around at customers for a long period of time. People don't know they're there. They don't know how to optimize routing and pick them up. But you can free up a lot of working capital simply by increasing the flow time of those items. It also ripples into customer service. Where is my stuff? Answering questions and not having people run around trying to find something either on the factory floor or at a customer site. It ripples into production planning and production disruptions, and having the right kind of equipment to pick up finished goods or move inventory. So there's tremendous ROI in our experience for companies that really start pushing on this.
One final question on this section. What do you see as the cost of tracking that beer keg, and how has that come down in 2020?
Yeah, the way I think about it is you have to get a price point down to some single-digit percentage of the value of the asset for this to start to get really interesting. So now you're talking about, with beer kegs, single-digit dollars per device. So this takes you into really long operational life Bluetooth devices, either batteryless or printable, aggregated. Maybe 1 out of every 5, 1 out of every 10 beer kegs has cellular backhaul capability, and that basically is interspersed within the other kegs, so that offers you the ability to backhaul that information from just Bluetooth only devices. So the cellular device might be more expensive, or would be more expensive because it's got a cellular modem and a radio in it, but the Bluetooth devices then that are talking to it are way down the cost curve, and on a blended basis, that's less expensive. You're seeing the cost of IoT infrastructure to backhaul that data, dropping, pretty significantly, and the ability to manage, hundreds of thousands or millions of assets with the out-of-the-box scalable infrastructure that's already been built, by companies like Clearblade, also, coming to bear to bring down the recurring revenue, associated.
Bob, let me comment on that, and thank you for saying Clearblade. Obviously, we're on this together, but here's one thing that I specifically have learned just in the last year or so is, depending on what you're tracking, if you can't get down to single-digit dollar per year, roughly, depends on the item, depends on what you're doing. There's lots of parameters in here, but give your customer a bill of materials cost on a per unit basis that factors in and fits within their business model. You can't win in this space. And our experiences showed that if you're piecing these solutions together with what I call Lego bricks in the cloud, you're spending months or years to do it, and you still can't get down to that price per unit. So it takes kind of a fused, I'll continue the analogy, Mindstorm-like brick in the middle that's cost effective, that has been proven to scale, and that you can get predictive per unit costing out of. And then there's plenty of stuff that the business needs to customize around that brick. That's what leads to the price performance that we're getting. That's what leads to the ability to adopt across different items in your business, and then you can start to spread that overall cost out. But it's been an amazing thing to learn just in the last year or two on evolving in this space.
I'm going to move us on into the next trend. This kind of builds on what we've already been talking about, expanding IoT strategies, really going from point problems to broad-based digital transformation initiatives. It's the combination of, in my view, the first two things we talked about. The need for digital transformation is accelerating and really facing a dislocation in terms of even the acceleration, given the change from COVID, as we talked about earlier. The thing you mentioned earlier, Eric, about its ability to track not only the beer kegs, but the generators and your servers, and really have a comprehensive solution. That's what allows you to move from a point solution to a digital transformation, is when you can finally track everything. The example I like to use is we see manufacturing companies, particularly discrete manufacturers, rail cars, buses, auto manufacturers, people assembling computer products. They start with one aspect of their production system. Typically, it's either I want to track people to understand who's efficient, who's not, our subcontractors that may be doing cleaning and maintenance, where they're supposed to be, those kind of things, or they're looking to track work in process, or they're looking to track tools and calibrated instruments, or they're looking to track inventory, or they're looking to track the carts that are moving inventory around. But we're now at a point where you can track all of that and really build this real-time model of your entire production operation that allows you to start to do those analytics, Eric, that you were alluding to, with real-time data to start to show, tremendous insight into how you can improve overall productivity that leverages all those different aspects of our production system.
Yeah, Bob, I love this topic because it's central to everything that we're doing together. Look, I'll tell a short story. We've got a specific customer that started with tracking shipments of sulfuric acid. Again, business we know nothing about, but we know how to track things, we know how to monitor things, right? And so it started with, we're going to track shipments from Florida to California to Mexico, and we want predictive delivery times. We want to be able to notify our customers when a shipment arrives, so they don't have to go send a truck or a helicopter to go find these things, right? Well, the thing that's interesting is when you deliver a solution that does that, and then you start saying, right? This is not a point solution. This is an and solution, which says, okay, we're tracking the shipments of the sulfuric acid. Now, do you want to monitor the tank levels in your sulfuric acid tanks? Yes. Well, you've got the technology already to do it. It's now just connecting to what you already have in the field, people that do understand how to build the right sensors to do these things, right? The acoustic sensors to measure tank levels. But instead of them being kind of siloed and that information data being siloed, we can go connect to that and stream it into the same system that you have to track your rail cars. And then we can also track the pumps that are pumping the sulfuric acid. And now you get into some predictive maintenance stuff. Oh, you want to tie in your financial data feed and your supply chain or your supply, and you want to do some dynamic pricing. Well, now you've got the system to do that. And trust me, it's gone beyond where we thought we could go, which is like, well, we know how to track assets, and tracking and monitoring becomes synonymous, right? It all depends on what device you're connected to. Is it moving? And you have a device that's GPS and so forth, then you're tracking. Is it stationary? Are you tied into the machine spinning or the fuel level? Then it's monitoring. And then you start combining all these things. That's the power of what you said on this slide. Not point problems, but digital transformation initiatives that really get to the heart of the business, whether it's bottom line, whether it's net zero emission initiatives, right? Climate change is important, and there's many big companies that are driving towards that. Well, this helps with all of that. So I get real excited when I start talking about asset tracking, and it kind of morphs into, wow, this is really core to their business goals.
Couldn't agree more. But Jennifer, questions, or should we jump to the next?
I think we're good to keep going. We've got some specific questions that I'm answering to people specifically, but not for the whole group.
Got it. The number 4 here, really, Eric, this is your heart of the plate, but I'll tee it up if you will.
Sure.
one of the things that we see companies don't fully appreciate is as you move to this broad-based digital transformation where you're connecting, to use your example from before, not just the shipments of sulfuric acid, but now the tank levels and the pumps, you start to get this rapidly growing array of devices to monitor, manage the actual device and manage the firmware, understand the operational life, the battery status, those types of things. Do these devices get damaged in the field? How do you associate a new device with the same asset, or potentially multiple devices with a single asset? So the amount of complexity to manage this deployed set of things, right? It's the T in IoT makes this world very complicated. As that scales, the complexity scales dramatically. And I think one of the things that has kept a lot of these companies, to go back to your science experiment comment earlier, a lot of companies from scaling is the scaling challenge here is fundamentally harder and significantly harder than what you would have with just a pure cloud-based piece of software, where the scalability is well understood now with cloud-based software. The challenge with IoT is you're scaling the firmware across a growing and growing more disparate set of devices and managing that physical devices as well as the firmware on them. That's a hard problem to solve, and it requires a whole nother function for scaling that a lot of people are underappreciating. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Eric. This is your expertise.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, I completely agree with you. And one thing that, it's funny, my CTO would always say, we're an application company, not a device management company. And over time, because we focus on the delivery of the application, giving the visuals, moving the data, but we figured out, you can't have one without the other. It's impossible. You have to handle the connectivity of the devices, the notifications when you need a firmware update or a battery change or so forth. And that takes working in concert with the vendors of the devices, because they're going to be experts in their sensor, their gateway, their equipment. But if you work with them and have the mechanisms to deliver their firmware updates, right, get their notifications on things. Also, be aware of any security updates that have to happen. This is a combination of device management and DevOps that is critical to have any sort of an enterprise or industrial strength IoT solution. And we've become very good at doing it within our software, but also, I always use the term playing nice with others. You have got to integrate with existing systems, both on the firmware and device side and on the enterprise side, to be able to offer up that sort of service to your customer. DevOps is another one, right? There's so much talk about DevOps, but the last thing the operations people need to hear, or the business people that we deal with, is the term DevOps. That needs all to be hidden, packaged, covered by the solution. And so they have the confidence that my devices are secure in the field. I am being notified when something needs replacing or needs changing. And I can now see all 100,000 devices at the click of a button and drill into how each one is operating or where they are. It's an extreme challenge, especially at scale. And that's why one of the things that we recommend anyone out there, when you're looking at whoever, make sure that that company has scaled to hundreds of thousands of concurrent devices, because when forced to prove that, that will shake a lot of folks up. And that's something obviously we've had to go through, and our engineers have had to really work to make sure that we scale efficiently, and we've got or have a constant eye on making sure that we can continue to do so.
Yep, same for us. Scaling to several 100,000 devices and looking at millions. You you've got to have the depth of experience to make that work. It is not a trivial exercise at all.
And that's why with our Venn diagrams of both companies intersecting at that critical point, that's what made this partnership so natural for both sides.
I'm going to move us on here. Time to value. We're seeing, again, as this industry and the partnerships that are pre-integrated, more and more out-of-the-box solutions with plug-and-play capabilities, faster reporting, faster analytics, and essentially faster time to value. And this is what's starting to become, frankly, for me, a lot more fun. We can work with a company and very quickly start to deploy, generate data, and generate ROI from an IoT solution. So the need for experimentation and science experiments is declining rapidly, and I think we're seeing the ability to start to generate value very, very quickly, given the maturity of the technology today.
Yeah, Bobby hit it right in the head. And a couple of years ago, I would use the Sonos example, right? I always like to try to relate to something that my friends understand or my mother understands. IoT needs to get to just like adding a Sonos speaker to my system here at home, right? I buy the speaker, ships to my door, I connect it to Wi-Fi, I configure it, and it works. That is the holy grail of IoT. We have got to get to that across the industry. And one of the ways we're doing it is partnering with folks like Link Labs, right, to have an out-of-the-box solution, but also partnering with other hardware folks, gateway folks, and camera companies. So you can deliver an out-of-the-box intelligent video solution. You can deliver an out-of-the-box generator monitoring solution. And a lot of that is trial, error, testing, certification. And then, one of the things we're doing is offering it through a Clearblade store to our customers. So if you're a rail provider or an aerospace manufacturer and you say, hey, look, I'd like to measure the fuel level of this generator. You type that in and up comes a set of devices that have been pre-tested, pre-packaged that you can buy and drop ship. That's early in our release of that. I think we just released it a week or two ago, but trying to get to that plug and play type, turn the thing on and it works. Takes a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, shameless plug on the Link Labs part. I guess, we have a device we call a Super Tag that works indoors and outdoors for seamless indoor-outdoor tracking. Now you can buy it on Amazon, ships to you, you get it the next day, 3-step configuration, you can start tagging stuff and you're off to the races. It was not like
coming
that.
soon to the Clearblade store, which will have a little star and right? We'll put you up on the preferred, Clearblade choice vendor list. How about that, Bob?
Exactly. But we're all driving towards, I call it the Apple, the Amazon type of experience. We all expect to order something today and to get it and to plug it in and do some very simple 1, 2, 3 configuration steps, and it just works. And we're improving all the time, but I'd say that the out-of-the-box experience today is dramatically different than it was 6 months ago, and certainly, if it's been a year or two since you played with IoT, it's completely different, night and day.
One question around this is, how do you handle large customers where there's multiple stakeholders in that decision-making process and in that rollout process? How can you bring more value when it's a large group and you've got to deploy enterprise-wide with the system?
Great question. Do you mind if I take that, Bob?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so what we found, and trust me, I come from a background of selling to enterprise and the top down, and that takes time. What we've learned is when you deliver value to a business unit and they can buy from swiping a credit card and installing a device and setting up a system, and that starts to grow within the organization, you get champions. And then those champions say, hey, look, this stuff really works. And I don't have to call a developer or call IT to configure what I want to do. I can set my rules. I can change my display. I can run it on an iPad. I can put it on a 60-inch, 70-inch television screen in my ops center, and it works. And one thing that I really enjoyed seeing over the last year was people get excited about what we're doing. And we realize, oh my gosh, we're onto something with this no-code deployment, service the business person, and then the enterprise will take a look and say, well, we've got an initiative that's 4 years out and so forth. But if what you're doing now works, we'll find a way to include that in the initiative, right? We've got some big companies that are looking at big enterprise asset management systems that come from the big vendors, but we play nice with others. That's one thing we say is like, look, if you don't have a solution that's open and can communicate and flow the data to wherever you want as a customer, then you don't have a solution. You have a point solution that's a silo. And if you're just a yes and company and you can add that value, then you typically get brought into the broader rollout.
Yep, I would agree. I only a couple of comments would be, every organization's different. Some certainly have a lot of internal culture around stakeholder buy-in from an IT, finance, business owners, et cetera, operations. And good organization certainly can work with those stakeholders and understand how it works for them. I do think that the ability to start at a very low price point with an out-of-box solution that starts delivering value right away really helps accelerate these conversations and changes the dynamic pretty significantly. The way I think about businesses, as a P&L owner, you have a spreadsheet somewhere with your budget, and there's a number on that spreadsheet that's got to change for the better by adopting some technology. And you need to show that really fast. And that's what gets people out of bed to start moving much more quickly. So in my experience, proving value early is a key to getting that stakeholder interest and buy-in. It probably ties into another item here. So I'm going to use that to tee up also the next trend, which is responsiveness and future proofing. Given the fast evolving tech landscape that we've talked about, the high volumes of assets that need to be connected across all kinds of different sensor types and tags, and the partner ecosystem that requires, the different types of connectivity from local connectivity to network operators, you really need tremendous architectural flexibility and interoperability. Both Link Labs and Clearblade bring that to the table so that there isn't vendor lock-in as you start to deploy these solutions. I think historically with point solutions, and appropriately so, there's been a lot of concern around deploying or scaling an IoT solution because, hey, what if that's not the right company or the right vendor? How do I change to different device types or different network layer technologies or different visualization? Today, you have open architecture interoperability capabilities with end-to-end solution providers like Link Labs, companies like Clearblade as well. We're partner ecosystem oriented so that we can stay best of breed with you, which should give a lot of companies a lot more confidence that they're not going to be subject to vendor lock-in and make a decision they regret a year or two later, that they're really working with a journey partner, is my favorite kind of phrase here, that will evolve with them and their needs.
Yep, Bob, I couldn't agree more. Look, technology is constantly changing on all fronts. Sensor technology, chip technology, communications technology, cloud, security, and you've got to look at all those vectors and then make sure that you are delivering the best of breed in software and hardware to your customer, and that takes a lot of work. But the other key is, you just nailed it, is openness, flexibility. If you don't have a solution that plays nice with others, right, you've got to be able to integrate with that ERP system that was purchased 30 years ago. You've got to be able to run in any cloud that the customer wants, or on premise, or at the edge, right? We can get into all the technology reasons, but the one thing that I keep hearing is flexibility is key. You got to be able to choose the hardware that you want for your business, and have the flexibility of the partners that are working with you on your digital transformation and IoT to be flexible. So whenever I see a vendor that has a solution, but that solution is tied to a device through their cloud, and that data is trapped, that's a red flag, right? You've got to be able to have vendors that all work well together in their specific areas. And that's another testing point to say, you know, can I hook it to these things? And is it going to take months of services work to do that? Or can I do it turnkey out of the box and just have the stuff flowing into my existing systems?
We're getting several questions around this and security. How do you manage security of the asset tracking systems?
Bob, you want to take it or you want me to start? It's up to you.
Happy to talk about what we do, and you can talk about what you do. I mean, we're focused on end-to-end security. I think the easiest, the shortcut answer for me is that, you know, that security is a paramount importance in IoT. We see it as in all the surveys, et cetera, as being top of mind for most customers. Having scaled with Fortune 100 companies to hundreds of thousands of devices, the security questionnaires, you know, they get to be 50, 100 pages long. You know, as you work with partners, security is always top of mind, and making sure you're using the, you know, state-of-the-art technologies and to do that and implement that is mission critical. So, you know, hard to answer that with the specifics of the technology given the scope and breadth that's required, but it's absolutely mission critical.
Yeah, Bob, again, it's a multi-level concern, right? You've got to have security at all levels and by all vendors. You know, it's funny, we fill out the same forms that are 50 pages, SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, and all that matters, right? A lot of that's on the cloud side, but you've got to have software, I think, that is built from the ground up, at least from my perspective, with a blank sheet of paper that focuses on security. I see a lot of software out there that security is a bolt-on. That's a problem. And you have to have diligence to be looking for what the threats are every day, right? No matter what you're using, open source or whatever, especially open source, right? There's always something new that says, hey, there's this vulnerability in Linux or whatever, and you have to have an engineering team that's constantly focused on drilling into, yep, we solved that problem, we've got that covered. That's DevOps, right? Constant having a person on that wall, right, watching for that security. And then again, playing nice with others. There's all sorts of chip security out there, hardware security, cloud security. You've got to kind of dovetail with all that stuff. I actually don't think companies are asking enough about security, in my opinion, because it tends to be an afterthought in some cases. I'm like, that should be one of the first questions out of the gate, is security.
Yeah, the other thought, this really highlights the importance of firmware over-the-air capabilities and the ability to upgrade and manage your system as it's deployed and scaled proactively, because security and threat vectors are an ever-evolving landscape. Firmware is ever-evolving landscape for everything from all the chip components to gateways, et cetera. So you're managing a lot of complexity that's physically distributed, and you have to have the ability to manage that in a very efficient way, an effective way, you know, from a device management DevOps perspective. And that involves also being able to send, you know, new releases down to devices so that you can, as any vulnerabilities are identified, you can address them. So really critical to have this kind of very sophisticated scalability and device management firmware over-the-air capabilities associated with a scaling deployment.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump to the next one. The last trend, I think we've kind of teed this up, more and more value from IoT data. We've talked about the breadth of sensors, location information, the scope of things that are getting connected now. We tend to see companies go through multiple levels of utilization of that real-time information. The first is basic reporting and basic insights. You know, where is stuff? Which customers have it? How often are my inventories turned? What's causing production disruptions? Those types of things. Then you tend to say, as you get a broader set of data, you start unlocking a lot more value through analytics and business intelligence, really, but looking at what happened in the rearview mirror, you know, deeper insights into what went wrong. And then you finally start to see companies moving, and frankly, we don't see a lot as far along as I think we will in the next year or two, but what's coming for sure is predictive analytics, identifying problems before they occur, preventing them. the pattern recognition that can come from AI of, this is what's happened in the past. This is where there's going to be a constraint, a bottleneck, a production disruption, and the action you should be proactively taking now to improve your customer experience or your productivity as an organization. So we're seeing the migration from basic reporting and insights, where there's a lot of value to be unlocked, to the predictive piece, which really starts to generate massive ROI.
Yep. And Bob, I mentioned it earlier. Look, aircraft maintenance. I didn't realize how valuable that historical data was on. We need more of this. I can now have justification on how we're using our assets. Before it was anecdotal. That's a basic one. That's your reporting and basic insights. But the more that we do these things, the more I realize how hard it is to get real-time IoT data. And another example is, look, we've done some work with oil drilling and experts that read data coming off of oil rigs for weight on bit and rate of penetration. Again, terms I didn't know much about. And training things like AI models based on historical, which is valuable. But the harder trick is, how do you get that data in real time so you are adjusting on the fly and you are building new models to handle not only general trends, but specific situations by site, because they're all different. And the critical part is getting that IoT data in real time and training new models and adjusting that model on the fly. And that's some of the really hard work that has to get done to connect these things up. So the value from that data, again, is exponential, because not only is it just helping with that model, but then business people are saying, what if we tied in this financial stream? What if we tied in this weather pattern or the price of oil, whatever it is? That's where I think ML and AI gets interesting, is when you get the data and you have business people that know the business. It's not magic. It's basically helping people that already know what to do with more data and automating that.
Yeah, the really reminds me, we've come almost full circle in this webinar. We started with digital transformation and the pace of adoption of IoT technology is really driving a step change in digital transformation. Predictive analytics, real-time adjustments off of real-time data, as you've described, that is the digital transformation that is now possible, and some industries are embracing, and we're seeing more and more industries embrace that. I'm going to move to our last trend, which is a little bit of a shameless one slide only plug for your hosts today, Link Labs and Clearblade. And it's simply that we're seeing a lot of healthy demand as solution providers in the IoT industry. A little bit about Link Labs. We really are focused on bringing all the pieces together for industry-leading solutions. Everything from local network coverage to device management to mass-produced hardware from a variety of partners, an ecosystem of partners, extending the battery life of devices, making sure that we can actually monitor them with fuel gauges, those types of things. 24 by 7 by 365 monitoring support, everything, including the tools required for installers to deploy across a geographically distributed footprint. All of this really aimed, again, at that driving down the cost curve. So that's a little bit more about what we think we bring to the table, and I'll jump to the next slide and Eric, give you your.
Sure. And Clearblade partners with folks like Link Labs that supply solutions in ways that give customers the flexibility to then encompass more, right? So look, we were a platform company. The word platform is an overloaded term. Everybody's got a platform, and your platform is only as good as the application, the business application that you provide on top of it. And we've created the Clearblade Intelligent Assets application, so you can connect to anything in your enterprise or add any new thing, sensor, gateway, you name it, and leverage the power of our scalability, our ability to run on the edge compute, and our ability to integrate with enterprise systems. So, when you hear us talking about solutions around aerospace or railway or intelligent video analytics, a video camera is just another sensor, and it's a data feed that you can then add to that system. So during the pandemic, what we learned was this is what's working for our customers. So we focus more on the application and then use the power of our platform to fuel that.
Awesome. Final thoughts here is, I think, to leave with folks, disruption is usually the catalyst for changing the order of industry leadership in any particular vertical market. And we're seeing the digital transformation from IoT now become a disruptive force in respective industries. So the urgency I would encourage participants on the call today to think about is, are you ahead of your peers or behind your peers in adopting IoT initiatives and driving towards digital transformation? The order of who is market leading will likely change coming out of this transformational experience. With that, why don't we do any final Q&A, Jennifer, before we wrap things up? We may have lost Jennifer. I'd just like to thank everyone for participating today. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out to either Link Labs or Clearblade for further dialogue and conversation.
Yeah, to answer more and have one-on-one conversations with anyone that has questions. And Bob, thank you for inviting me on this. This has been wonderful. Appreciate you thinking of us.
Yeah, Eric, really appreciate your time today. You've been a great partner, and our companies are working fabulously well together. So it's great to bring complementary technologies to our customers and really see the promise of IoT take off. So thank you.
Great. Well, happy Wednesday, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you again.